War II, a Japanese soldier was hiding out in the mountains of a foreign country, having been sent there to fulfill a suicide mission. Never, ever surrender. That is what his commander had told him. And so, even after the war ended and the soldiers were told to come home, he stayed for another 30 years, fighting a war that had long since ended. This is the story of Hiroo Onoda. Onoda was deployed to a small island in the Philippines called Lubang. He and his troops were given the specific order to never, ever surrender. Unfortunately, the Americans overpowered the Japanese soldiers, and eventually, he and 3 other soldiers were the only ones to survive. They had no choice but to flee to the mountains. It was 1945 when the US had dropped 2 atomic missiles on Japan, leaving them with no choice but to surrender. The war had come to an end, and leaflets were scattered all throughout the Pacific region.
Nani?
He thought it was just a trick and refused to believe it. Years had passed by. Onoda's companions either surrendered or got killed. After his last companion died, he continued his mission for the succeeding years, still determined to fight a war that ended 2.5 decades ago. To the Japanese people, he became nothing more than an urban legend. Meanwhile, after the war, Japan was extremely poor. With the US's aid, however, Japan was able to recover. With the economy's rapid development, Japan was richer and more superficial than ever. Enter Suzuki. Suzuki was a young man in Japan who was overwhelmed by the shallowness of Japan's culture. In short, he was a hipster. Because of this, he set out on a journey to find Onoda. To cut the long story short, he was able to find Onoda in 4 days and convinced him to come home to Japan. And when he did, he was welcomed back as a hero. Everyone was surprised at his return. Remember, this guy was cut off society for decades. To them, he was a time traveler. So when he returned to the new, capitalist Japan, he was horrified and noped out of there. He even stated that he was disappointed in Japan's withering values. Most ironically, he was more depressed then than when he was hiding out in the forests. At least there, he was still under the impression that Japan was still what it was decades ago, a nation that he respected, that he would die for. Mark Manson follows up this story with an important lesson. Self-awareness is like an onion. There are multiple layers to it, and the more you peel them back, the more likely you're gonna start crying at inappropriate times. The most basic layer is the ability to assess one's emotions. Knowing you feel happiest when you're eating a bag of Cheetos and saddest when you're away from your computer, things like that. The second layer is the ability to ask why we feel these emotions, and by what standard we're judging ourselves and everyone around us. It says in this book that this layer is the most important because our values determine the nature of our problems, and the nature of our problems determine the quality of our lives. Onoda wouldn't have lasted 30 years without his traditional Japanese values. He wanted to live up to the standards of what he thought Japan still was. When he saw how much Japan has changed, he felt as though all he had fought for was wasted. 30 years went down the drain like nothing. To summarize, your values affect your decisions in life. So having good values means you get to make good decisions. In contrast, having bad values is going to lead you astray. So you've reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave a like and comment and subscribe. You can check out my other videos here. Thanks.